No, I'm glad that you touched upon this, because this is a huge issue. And something that I've talked about before too is that, a lot of times we meet people's imperfection with the perfection of Islam. And I always say, you're not Islam. I'm not Islam. My name is not Islam. Islam is a perfect religion, but I'm a human being. I'm a soul. I'm an imperfect person. So when people come to you with their imperfection, when you meet them with the perfection of Islam and not with another imperfect heart, what essentially you're doing is you're just creating a space where you have promoted their ego to come to the lead. Why? Because any human being, when they bring their imperfection and their vulnerability into a space and they're met with perfection, you feel overwhelmed. You feel less than. So what does the ego, what is the role of the ego? It comes up to preserve your image. It comes up to preserve your that inner security, right? So you're only creating a space where their ego comes up, not their heart. So in that moment, you presented a beautiful perfection of Islam, but guess what? You lost that person's heart. And guess what? Now you're only speaking to their ego. So you lost. So if our efforts are really sincere and we really want to speak to people's hearts, if the heart in you and the heart in other people is the priority, that's what you're going to focus on. And it comes from prioritizing our own hearts first. I always tell my students that, and this is something I felt within me, the more that I worked on my own heart, the more that I wanted to speak to the hearts of others, because you realize that you could be speaking to people's ego or you could be speaking to people's hearts, right? And so absolutely, I think so that's one thing, right? Don't meet people with perfection when they bring their imperfection to you. So first, see their heart, validate them. Again, remember, when you validate an experience, it doesn't mean you're saying it's right. You're saying that it's real. It's happening for that person. When you validate somebody and you say, I see that this is happening. I'm sorry that you're going through this, just making them feel seen and heard. That's not you saying, I approve. That's you saying, I see you. I see your heart. I see you. And I still am accepting you. I'm meaning not accepting your behavior. I'm accepting the heart in you, that most important part within you, that soul, right? Not accepting the behavior, but I see you and your worth and you're still worthy to me, right? And so first, that's what we do. We validate. And then we create a space where that person's ego goes down and their heart starts to come up, because then they feel seen. And when you do that, that's when you create a space where people are more willing to hear the perfection of Islam. So that's one thing. This is going to be a little bit, it's a twofold kind of answer. So
Please keep going.
The next thing is, Islam is about sidq, truthfulness. If you look at even just what was it called? What's it called? The process of how Islam was revealed, right? The first ayat of the Quran that came down weren't about halal and haram. I mean, it wasn't about the rulings, right? It was about connecting the hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the reality that awaits them, to the akhirah, to the reality of their purpose, the reality of why they're here, right? It was about softening the heart with that truth. The rulings of no alcohol and hijab and all these things, the outer presentation also of Islam, more so later on, right? And so we don't do that with people. Allah is so much more merciful to us than we are to people, because, we expect people to just tell us, you're going to practice. Okay, perfection, that's it. Right. But that's not the way it is. And everybody's on their own journey. So I would say that Islam came down to reveal truth, and everything about Islam is about sidq, authenticity, truthfulness. And it's about connecting people to truth so that they can live in that truth. And so what we want to do is, foster that in our hearts and the hearts of others. So be truthful with Allah, meaning that if you have one thing that you're doing with Allah, don't lose that, right? Let's say somebody comes to you and they say, I don't want to wear hijab anymore, right? But they're still praying. Tell them, hold on to that. Don't leave that. That's your door. Just be truthful with Allah. If it may, inshallah, you want to come back to wearing hijab, but just be truthful with Allah. Keep the door open with Allah. And there's a story. I'm really bad with remembering names. I remember meanings from things I learn and I take it with me, but I'm bad with remembering names. But there's a story that one of my teachers taught me, and he said, he told me about this man who was a thief, right? And he was basically, him and a group of people they stole they robbed somebody who was traveling through. So they robbed them, and then they were about to sit down and eat. And the man said, "Oh, sorry, I'm not going to eat. I'm fasting." So this man, who is a thief, chose not to eat because he was fasting. Eventually, this man became righteous later on. Sorry. See, this is why I'm so bad. So then they asked him, "You're a thief. You're fasting." He said, "This is the door that I keep open with Allah." Eventually, this man became a very righteous man later on. So it's a more detailed story. But at the end of the day, I would tell everybody, including myself first, is that you don't answer to anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah knows your own journey. Allah knows what you've been through. Allah knows what you're struggling with. Allah knows what is in your heart, but just be truthful with Allah. It doesn't matter what story and narrative you tell people. It doesn't matter, what explanation you give to people. At the end of the day, just keep a door open with Allah. Just because you took off hijab doesn't mean abandon everything. Keep a door open. If you stop doing one deed, do the deed. Keep being consistent in the deed that you do, that you are able to hold on to, and keep asking Him for help. But keep the door open. But there is no such thing as everyone's perfect. And honestly, I even think the most religious people, right? Like, let's say it's a level, different levels or whatever. Even if you're so religious and you're presenting all of these things and you're a work in progress too. And you still have things that you have to work on with Allah. And maybe for you, if you are at that level, it is only because of Allah's rahmah towards you. And it's only because of Allah's grace towards you. And this is something that we miss. Like, sometimes people, they'll say things like, "Oh, it's so easy for me to fast. It's so easy for me to do this. It's so easy for me to do this." And we have to take a pause and remember that it is only by the grace of Allah that we are able to do those things. Because honestly, and last thing I'm going to say, the line between being practicing, and I learned this from my own life and from working with so many people, is that the line between being practicing and not practicing is so thin. And it is our own illusion that we think it is like, us getting to that? Never. Me taking off hijab? Never. Me not praying? Never. Beware of saying things like that. If something comes easy to you, it's not because of you. It's because of Allah's rahmah towards you.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much for dropping those gems, honestly.